Hey, it's Nancy. Before we begin today, I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
A listener's note. The following episode contains coarse language, adult themes, and content of a violent and disturbing nature, and may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
I've been a journalist for nearly 3 decades. Over those 29 years, I've sat in countless courtrooms and spent thousands of hours in trials and criminal proceedings. I cover cases from start to finish and stick with these stories for years. I attend a lot of parole board hearings, which involves receiving board approval, and to get that, there's paperwork with applications for special media clearance. For many years, I would have to attend in person, which meant going to the prison where the offender was serving their sentence. It's a daunting experience going through the prison security checks. You have to leave all personal belongings and electronic devices behind. Then, with just a pen and notepad in hand, I would be escorted through the institution to a relatively small room, where there are always parole board members, often victims' family members, and of course, the offender. I would be seated just feet away from the convicted criminal. In these very close quarters, I would hear deeply emotional statements from a victim's family, followed by a question and answer period between the board members and the offender. Since 2020, I've been attending these hearings remotely. There are still special conditions and security requirements, but logistically, it allows me to attend more hearings, especially when some are held in other provinces. That was the case on January 7th of this year, when a hearing was held on Vancouver Island in BC. I watched on a video link as a convicted killer from one of the most brutal and senseless cases I've ever covered made a pitch for freedom. During the proceedings, every horrific detail came flooding back to me, from the crime scene to the graphic evidence presented in court. I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. Today, on Crime Beat, I bring you the latest developments by giving you an exclusive look into that parole board hearing. And I take you inside the investigation for details of an interview with one of the killers. This is an update to Face to Face with Evil. In the fall of 2010, the Mariani family was shattered.
When you see what they did and you know what they did, you see a different kind of violence and you see a different kind of person, and it's a whole other animal.
That's Dino Mariani. You'll hear more from him later in this episode, as he shares the ongoing impact of the savage killing of his brother. On October 3rd, 2010, a 911 call led police to a strip mall in Northwest Calgary. When police arrived at the scene, they found a man lying in a pool of blood outside of his vehicle. The SUV was also covered in blood. It appeared he had tried to get inside, but wasn't able to. Police followed a trail of blood to a nearby alley, where they located the man's wallet and keys, and another massive pool of blood. Investigators believed the man was beaten and stomped beyond recognition. The victim was Mark Mariani, a beloved family man. At 47, he lived with his parents. His health had deteriorated after suffering from Crohn's disease for more than half of his life. It made no sense to his loved ones why anyone would kill him. His wallet and keys were found near the crime scene, and police quickly ruled out robbery. But investigators struggled to come up with a motive for such a brutal and violent attack. I shared details of this case in Season 1 of Crime Beat, the day Mark Mariani came face to face with evil. We've also re-released the episode for you. In the end, a lengthy investigation revealed Mark Mariani was truly an innocent victim who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. To get to that point, detectives identified nearly 24 possible suspects within days of the homicide. They worked through the list, and many were quickly eliminated. And then, by that process of elimination, there were 2 remaining. The men were known for violence and hate, members of a white supremacist group and known to wear big black boots with lug soles. For months, police followed the evidence and used covert techniques to try to unravel the truth. 8 months after Mark was killed, in the spring of 2011, police made arrests in the case. That's when months of planning by veteran detective Mike Shute was put into action. He's a staff sergeant now, but back then, he was a detective. He's an experienced crisis negotiator who leads the forensic interview team for homicide and other major crimes investigations. That would be his role in this case, to interview one of the men accused of killing Mark Mariani. And for the first time, he's sharing his experience. It all began on June 1st, 2011. Detective Shute had had a restless night. He didn't get much sleep. He had too much on his mind, wired from months of meticulous planning that was all about to be put into action. He got out of bed before his alarm even went off, then took his time to thoughtfully choose his outfit for the day. Detective Shute wanted to appear somewhat casual, but dressy enough to command respect. He chose a light-colored short-sleeved button-down shirt. That would allow him to reveal tattoos on his shoulder easily, should the right moment present itself. The rest of his outfit was completed with dark brown pants and brown suede lace-up hiking shoes. Detective Shute arrived at Calgary Police Headquarters by 6:30 a.m. and went directly into one of the interview rooms used by the homicide unit. He had his presentation all mapped out. Now he just needed to put it into action. He carefully laid out photographs and loaded up a PowerPoint presentation along with video and audio files. That day, police would try to interview 2 people, Robert Reitmeyer and Tyler Stirrup. Both were facing charges of second-degree murder in the death of Mark Mariani. Several seasoned investigators took turns and attempted to get Reitmeyer to open up, to no avail. Now, it was Detective Mike Schute's turn with the other accused. He went into a separate, empty interview room, turned on the camera, stated the date and time, and introduced himself. Then, Detective Shute added a special preface on the recording. He explained that during the course of the following interview, he planned to use strong language and would likely make offensive and off-color statements. He wanted anyone who watched the video to know he would be making those comments solely to gain a rapport with the accused, and most importantly, that they didn't reflect his own personal beliefs. Detective Shute took a final scan of the room. He left the camera on, exited, then grabbed a coffee and waited for his interview subject, Tyler Stirrup, to arrive. Getting to this point was a culmination of weeks' worth of research. Detective Shute was so well-versed on Tyler Stirrup that he could have written a book about the self-proclaimed white supremacist. When he arrived, the detective went into the interview room, introduced himself, and held out his hand.
For Tyler, I remember, put my hand out, shake his hand, and he had his arms folded. I mean, he couldn't be more tight than what he was at that moment. But I didn't take my hand away. I'm like, you're shaking my hand. And, I waited, not long, but it was a socially awkward, long pause. But he reached out and he shook my hand. And that's the part where, as an interviewer, we're going to help control that environment a little bit. I talked about rapport and respect, and talked about, we don't build trust in very short periods of time, but we can offer respect to those. And I say generally I get it in return. And, that's going to have him thinking I should show this guy some respect, which will provide that platform for me to be able to start talking about the investigation when I feel that it's time to transition to that from rapport building.
Detective Shute had tailored every part of himself to be relatable to Stirrup, from his appearance to his accent. He knew Stirrup was originally from the East Coast, so he made his own Newfoundland accent sharper and added extra slang. He tailored his demeanor and body language to mimic Stirrup. And that shirt he had chosen for this specific interview, it came in handy.
So that's one of the things that we do for rapport building. So we're talking about being from East, and Tyler was very proud to be from Central Canada. And he talked about, people of different nationalities shouldn't be coming to Canada. We should kick them out of the country. And we talked a lot about that. So when I was able to kind of step that one notch up on him and say, well, where you're from is only 100 years old. Where I'm originally from is 500 years old because, I was from St. John's, Newfoundland. So, I upped him one on that. And I talked about, some of the heritage of Newfoundland. And he talked about Vikings because he had the cross of I think it was the Irish or the Celtic cross on his neck, a large tattoo. Well, I have some Viking tattoos. So when I showed him Viking tattoos, that became then a topic of conversation for a little bit of time. So again, that's the things that I'm looking for, is if I'm able to separate my personal beliefs or my personal disgust about what happened in the crime and develop some platform where I'm having some interaction with this person and they're seeing me as not necessarily a police officer. I'm not saying that we're gonna, remove it. He's in an audio video room in a locked police facility in an interview room. He knows he's speaking to a police officer, but for a short period of time, I want him to see me as Mike and somebody that he can talk to about some crime and not being Detective Shute, if that makes sense.
The investigator had reviewed countless surveillance files that showed Stirrup ate mostly fast food. To continue building trust, Detective Shute told him his fellow officers were going to grab some food, and he asked for Stirrup's order. It wasn't a "would you like something to eat" that could be turned down if he didn't feel like eating. The officer had the specific intent behind the meal, so the question was specifically posed as, "What would you like?" Detective Shute took detailed notes, knowing his ability to get things right for Stirrup would speak to the level of respect he commanded. Conversely, if Detective Shute got the order wrong, how could Stirrup trust him with his story? A short time later, officers knocked on the door and delivered 2 identical meals, both exactly as Stirrup had ordered. By getting the same meal, Detective Shute showed he was relatable down to the most minuscule details. And then, Detective Shute said they broke bread together. He specifically used those words to describe it to me and said there's something about 2 people sitting down and eating together that can help open the lines of communication. That meal was designed to be a time of social interaction.
Like any suspect that's under arrest, they're in somewhat of a state of crisis. I've often said it doesn't matter how seasoned of a criminal that they are. When they're sitting across an interview and they've been arrested and they've been told that they're charged, or we don't know at that point that they're going to be charged, they're in some form of crisis. So, my goal is to try to lower some of that anxiety and lower some of that crisis so we can start having some communication. So, I stay away from the investigative part. So I spend quite a bit of time just talking to Tyler, asking him questions, self-disclosure. So for me as an interviewer, I've never had any issue with providing some self-disclosure to open up to that person. And that's, I think, just a social thing. So even if you have some ideologies, there's still an inherent how you've grown up social aspect to it. So, if I share things to you, often you'll share things back to me. So, that's part of what I'm doing in the beginning is I'm trying to set that stage and set that tone so that I'm opening him up to conversation. But I was preparing for a long day, protracted interview with Tyler. I just anticipated that based on, his social beliefs is not really in line with most others. And, with any kind of law enforcement, authoritative figures, right off the bat, it's going to be adversarial. So.
Hours went by before Detective Shute slowly began to steer the conversation towards the murder of Mark Mariani.
Interviews are successful based on early interactions. It's based on, first impressions and that rapport building phase. Because if it just goes back that if somebody doesn't like me, they're not going to talk to me. And if I go in heavy-handed, or if I go in a heavy accusatory style of interviewing, they're going to shut down. And that's not my goal. My goal is not to go in and, start force feeding, investigative techniques that we did, or investigative avenues that we explored, or what we learned. It's to provide a bit of an environment that he reduces some of that anxiety, and he's like, I like this guy, and I feel comfortable in explaining some of the things that he may have been involved in for a crime.
Tyler Stirrup already knew that he was under arrest for that murder. But slowly, Detective Shute began revealing details of the investigation.
I think the interview was somewhere around 7 hours, 6.5 to 7 hours. But I hadn't anticipated Tyler to open up and be remorseful. I fully anticipated having to go into an evidence-based presentation to start layering on evidence to show that we had a case. That's kind of the objective, is to start layering pieces of evidence on there through a PowerPoint presentation, slow it down, and look for some avenues. Is he going to give me some information about that piece, or is he going to stay closed up and not talk about that?
Shute told Stirrup about CCTV surveillance video, forensic evidence collected, including photos of the graffiti and the can of red spray paint seized from the crime scene.
Those were pieces that I was able to present to him to see if he was going to provide any information. But Tyler didn't provide any information. He, stuck to, I'm not going to talk about this, I'll wait for my lawyer to deal with this, etc., throughout that part of the interview.
Stirrup, however, didn't realize that he had been the subject of a police sting operation. And the new friends he had recently confided in were actually undercover police officers.
At first, he didn't say anything. He didn't really say much about it. He just looked. You could see his mind was racing significantly. So at that point, my goal is, again, to start to sort of reduce some of that anxiety that he's having, so he can listen to what I'm presenting again and start making some decisions of whether he's going to provide some information or not provide information about what happened. I think for him it was a bit of a shock, and he's trying to replay really fast his last couple of months of his life and everything that he did and he said and where he went. And I just said to him, I said, Tyler, all your friends that you met, they're not your friends, they're my friends. They're all police officers. So it was a hard shock to him that he had become subject to an elaborate undercover operation and provided that information to us, which was significant, obviously, when it came to the final charges.
Detective Shute took his time, then played some of the damning videotaped statements Stirrup had made to undercover officers. And a warning, this statement contains strong language and extremely violent and disturbing details.
I broke once in the jaw and he hit the floor and it was all booze from there. Fucking girls getting that shit party. Well, when we left, he was barely, he stopped breathing and we fucking started kicking him again and he started breathing. And we just kept jumping on his head. My bro kept putting his hands on my shoulders and jumping up both fucking feet. We went for a good 5 minutes, straight boots fucking to the head, body, everything stomped. 2 of us, both feet fucking in there like fucking bit of blue on a steak.
Detective Shute said at that moment, Stirrup knew he had no way out. And while the detective said he didn't go into detail, he admitted he was involved in the murder.
He agreed. He was part of it. He tried to put some over, I think probably a bit more over on Robert, which is common. It's a self-preservation tactic that they do. I think with this, Tyler realized that it was a predatory attack. There's only so much that he can say to downplay it. I think he knew it was a heinous crime, and morally he knew that that was wrong. Did he have remorse? I don't believe that for a second. On that day at least, whether later he did or whatever, but I can tell you from the person I sat across from that day was not remorseful for stomping this man's life out, not whatsoever. I know it may sound a little bit silly, but I think when you interview people long enough, you kind of have an ability to kind of read people a little bit, and you could tell that he was void of any kind of emotion with this.
But his lack of remorse didn't matter. Stirrup admitted to shoot. He played a part in the murder of Mark Mariani.
I always still show that bit of respect at the end, and I shook his hand.
Stirrup's admissions that day were on top of the admissions he had already made to undercover officers, and on top of other evidence gathered in the case. These are all believed to be instrumental factors in Stirrup's decision to plead guilty to second-degree murder in the death of Mark Mariani, instead of standing trial. On March 4th, 2013, Stirrup was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 10 years. He was eligible to apply for parole in 2018, 8 years after Mark was murdered. But Stirrup has never applied for release, which means he's never had a parole hearing, which also means I don't have any further insight that I can provide into what he's been up to during his incarceration. So, whether he's been taking programs or courses or rehabilitation measures, or if he's been offending, all of those details remain unknown to the public until a hearing is held or the board releases a decision. For now, Tyler Stirrup remains in prison. The co-accused in the case, Robert Reitmeyer, did not plead guilty. Instead, he stood trial in front of a jury. Following lengthy court proceedings with disturbing evidence that included wiretap conversations, he was convicted of second-degree murder. Robert Reitmeyer was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 13 years and was eligible to apply for day parole in 2021. Reitmeyer appealed both his conviction and sentence. Both were dismissed. The Court of Appeal described the crime as a murderous assault of a defenseless person by two strangers simply for the fun of it. Now, less than 15 years after Mark Mariani was murdered, both killers are eligible for parole. That's his family's biggest fear. Here again is Dino Mariani, Mark's brother, who you heard from earlier in this episode.
I think Stirrup is just violent by nature, but I get the feeling that he's kind of a follower and doesn't really understand what he's doing or how he's doing it, even though he does. The thing with Reitmeyer is that he's the mastermind. He's the conniving one. He's the smarter of the two, I think. This is evil, hatred, and pure just violence at its most disgusting.
Robert Reitmeyer is serving his sentence at William Head Institution. The Parole Board said he's done well while in custody, and about 3 years into his sentence, he was moved from a maximum security prison to a medium security institution. 7 years later, in 2023, he was transferred to a minimum security facility in BC, just southwest of Victoria on Vancouver Island. He has a profile on an inmate dating website. and specifies an interest in corresponding with women. Reitmeyer describes himself as an animal lover, interested in music, physical fitness, being in nature, and binge-watching TV series. He asks interested women to send a photo. There are 2 profile pictures. In one, he's holding a cat. In the other, he's against a white wall that looks to be inside of a correctional facility. He's wearing a white tank top showing a multitude of white power tattoos on his upper body. In his bio, he states he intends to have some tattoos removed. As I mentioned earlier, on January 7th, 2025, I attended one of his parole board hearings remotely via a video link. I watched as Reitmeyer confirmed to the board that he's working on having some of his tattoos removed through painful and repeated laser treatments focused specifically on the ones on his face and hands. I should note his body is covered with dozens of these tattoos, from SS bolts to swastikas and a Nazi war eagle, just to name a few. Mark Mariani's 2 brothers attended the hearing in person at the minimum security institution. The rest of Mark's family attended remotely. 4 family members delivered emotional and powerful victim impact statements to let the board know they carry not only the emotional scars and trauma that will never heal, but also the fear and belief that Reitmeyer has repeatedly lied to the board. They shared a list of examples, instances they believe the convicted murderer contradicted evidence presented against him in court. Mark's brother, Dino, told the board he believes Reitmeyer has not changed and suggested he's following all the steps he needs to get out of jail, taking courses and telling the board what they want to hear just so he can expedite his release. In response, the board thanked each family member for their thoughtful comments. It was a lengthy hearing, and the offender always gets the final word. For his part, Reitmeyer told the board he no longer follows white power ideology and told the board he looks back at that time in his life with extreme shame, though he was questioned about a few instances which seemed to go against this, like when he was found with a photo of Hitler in his possession. Or on one occasion where he helped someone in prison fine-tune a well-known white power slogan that was to be tattooed on another inmate. The board didn't elaborate on the wording of that phrase, just that it was clear it was part of white supremacist ideology. Reitmeyer told the board he was just trying to be helpful. The purpose of this hearing was for the board to decide if Reitmeyer should be allowed his first step towards freedom, a 60-day UTA, unescorted temporary absence, to attend a program away from the prison in Victoria. They didn't go into specifics of the program, but said he would learn new skills for dealing with substance abuse. The board said it runs Monday through Thursday. Reitmeyer told the board if he's approved on his days off, he hopes to go to the gym and experience the city, and set him up for reintegration into a halfway house in the same location. After a brief deliberation, the board members stated Reitmeyer would not present an undue risk and granted him the 60-day unescorted temporary absence. They say he's been working to cascade to get to this point to begin the process of reintegration, and said this is a part of a structured plan. The board said he will be closely monitored while on his leave. He's not allowed to drink, associate with anyone involved in criminal activity, and he's not allowed to contact Mark Mariani's family. As I was putting together this episode, I received another decision from the Parole Board of Canada. The board said they needed to do another review of Reitmeyer's case after receiving new information from the Correctional Service of Canada relating to alleged drug use. On January 21st, 2025, 2 weeks after the previous hearing I attended, Reitmeier was called to provide a urine test. The board said at that time, Reitmeier disclosed to his institutional parole officer that he had smoked THC once over the holidays because he said he was feeling stress related to the holidays, his upcoming hearing, and media attention related to it. Reitmeier told the board that the THC did not reduce his stress and anxiety and said that he regretted his decision. He then provided a sample, addressed the incident in a counseling session, and told officials at his halfway house as well as his family. The urine test came back negative. The board found Reitmeier's, quote, slip-up was isolated and decided not to cancel his unescorted temporary absence. They went on to add that the substance abuse treatment program will provide him with additional skills for handling this type of struggle. This latest decision, coupled with the outcome of the hearing in January, has left Mark's family frustrated. They believe these decisions will in fact expedite Reitmeier's path to full parole. Mark's niece, Sandrine Weltzen, told me she fears he will reoffend.
He murdered my uncle in cold blood in the most brutal way possible. So why does he get to have a second chance? And he's gonna have a second chance to potentially harm someone else.
Mark's nephews, Nick and Stefan Weltzen, told me they don't believe Reitmeier has abandoned his hateful ideology.
I just think even changing your appearance, removing your tattoos that show your allegiance with the white supremacy movement, I don't think that changes anything. It just makes it so people can't identify you right off the bat, right? Like, I still don't think changing a tattoo will change your belief process.
It's disgusting. Deep down to the core of who they are is terrible. My fear is if they get out, that they'll try and track us down and find us, or they might just pass some poor innocent person on the side of the road and victimize them.
So far, the Mariani family has attended 2 parole board hearings. They told me it's extremely stressful, and they'll have to attend them over and over as both killers have life sentences. But they will continue to fight with the hope that no one else will be victimized by Mark's killers and will have to endure the pain they feel. His family does all they can to keep his memory alive. Nick Weltzen's firstborn child has Mark as his middle name. Here again is his brother, Dino Mariani.
I think just being together, I think for us, I think that's probably the best medicine we could have. And, you know, I said to my sister, I don't want to celebrate the day that Mark was murdered. I would rather celebrate Mark's birthday, and I would rather celebrate, you know, his spirit. And early on it was, you know, what would Mark want us to do, right? And I try to think of that all the time. When I'm feeling sad or angry or negative, I try to think, well, what would Mark want us to do? And what would Mark tell us to do? You know, and I think there's some healing in being together and celebrating, and not always the sorrow part of it, but the spirit part of it. I can't describe it to you. I can't tell people this is what we've lost. And at the center of it all is we've lost Mark, who was the guiding light in all of us. Still a better man than I'll ever be.
Thank you so much to Dino and each of Mark Mariani's loved ones for their help as I continue to cover this important story. Crime Beat is written and produced by me, Nancy Hixt, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Audio editing and sound design is by Rob Johnston. Special thanks to photographer-editor Danny Lantella for his work on this episode. Thank you to Jesse Weisner, our Crime Beat production assistant. And thanks to Chris Bassett, the VP of Network Content, Production and Distribution, and Editorial Standards for Global News. I would love to have you tell a friend about this podcast. There are 6 seasons of stories you can listen to and share. And please consider rating and reviewing Crime Beat on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can find me on Facebook at Nancy Hixt Crime Beat and on Instagram at nancy.hixt. Thanks again for listening. Please join me next time.